just love this place, don't you? I know it's kind of expensive, but everything's so top-notch.
Hey folks, know what you want?
Yes, I'd like to eat the down payment on a house with a side of flambéed emergency fund.
Excellent choice. And for you, sir?
I'm pretty hungry, so I'm going to have our retirement savings and, what the heck, a bottle of our daughter's college tuition.
Ooh.
Very good.
Do you think we spend too much on dining out?
Maybe, but everyone else is doing it. Besides, what's the alternative? Cooking at home?
I really enjoy how they start these videos, and this one actually I believe is a bit older of a video, but I still appreciate how they kind of do this like acting segment at the beginning to kind of make light of some of these serious issues, especially these financial issues that I think are tough to cover. So really appreciate these. Hopefully you all do too.
At least the breadsticks are free. "21% of Americans have no retirement savings, and another 10% have less than $5,000. It's even bleaker for millennials. Nearly 6 in 10 have nothing saved at all."
Now, there
Wow, that is very unfortunate for millennials in this time frame. I don't think this is that old of a video. For 6 in 10 millennials to have no savings at all, that is pretty tough. I'm a millennial myself, and that is very unfortunate to hear, especially since most of my friends are also millennials. So hopefully if you're a millennial, you're doing better than those 6 in 10 people.
are a lot of reasons for this. The increasing cost of housing, health insurance, and of course, student debt. But for many people, those costs are relatively fixed. If you're looking for practical areas to cut back, one sticks out like a fly in your soup: dining out.
In 2015, for the first time in history, Americans spent more money on bars and restaurants than on groceries, with the average household now spending more than...
That's a great point. I just wanted to pause there for a second because they just highlighted that the average individual spends more on eating out than groceries. Now, many of you are probably thinking, that seems unlikely, or maybe you're somebody who eats out and you're thinking, yeah, of course, that's exactly how it works. I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is the fact that when you eat out, it can cost a lot all at once. And so I know if I go to eat out at like an actual sit-down restaurant with another individual, that bill could be like half of my weekly grocery bill, just for a single meal. And that's obviously very inefficient. So while I totally believe that this is a likely scenario, there's a good chance that this is only making up a fraction of your actual eating habits. And this is definitely something that I would encourage other folks to reconsider. I myself eat at home a lot. I think it is a great way to save money. And I also think when you look at cheap options for eating out, I feel like the quality isn't really there, in my opinion. Like if you think of like fast food, I know especially with the recent like COVID times, like McDonald's, for instance, it was like 10 plus bucks for like a Big Mac at some point. And they were making like the patties thinner and putting less stuff in there. And so that's definitely an issue overall. Meanwhile, you could make something at home for relatively cheap. And I would encourage folks to consider that, generally speaking. And I also want to highlight, this is something that I think changes a lot within certain cultures. Like, if you see immigrants, for instance, those individuals are probably never eating out, or it's a very rare occasion. I know for myself, having come from an immigrant family, my parents and everyone else immigrated, and that was pretty true, especially when I was a younger child. I think as I've gotten older and they've gotten older, they've gotten more and more accustomed to this habit that is Americanized, but this is a pretty rare occurrence for folks in that demographic, and it's normal to just eat at home for months on end without ever going out to eat. And so it's totally possible, and some people don't even perceive it as odd to do it that way. They actually see it odd to go out as much as standard Americans do. Some people I know even go out like every single day, which is definitely not good for you financially, and potentially not good for you and your health either.
$3,000 annually on food away from home, representing between 5 and 7% of their total spending. Even though restaurant prices are increasing faster than inflation and grocery prices are holding steady or even falling, the average diner is still eating out around 5 times a week.
How much is this costing us? Well, restaurants typically mark up their food by around 300%, meaning the price on the menu is about 3 times what they actually spent on the food. If that seems like a lot, remember, you're also paying for the restaurant's rent, labor, equipment, and overhead. So if you live in an area where real estate values are increasing, that also applies to the surface area of your local restaurant's tabletops.
And that doesn't even include drinks. A survey by Zagat found that the average restaurant bill per person is over $36. If you do this just 3 times a week, that's over $5,600 a year. By contrast, the average meal cooked at home with groceries from the market is about $4 a person. Now you can see why so many financial advisors focus on dining out as a place to save money.
How much money could you potentially save? I think it's time to run the numbers. Let's say Jake here goes out for dinner 3 times a week, spending $35 each time. He starts every workday with a latte and croissant at his local coffee shop and buys lunch at the local food court 4 days a week. Fridays are pizza day at the office. In 1 year, he spent over $9,000 on commercially prepared food and drinks, over 12% of his yearly salary of $75,000.
What if Jake could get those 3 dinners down to just 1 a week? And what if he started making coffee and breakfast at home and brown bagged lunches at work? Assuming that all those homemade meals would come out to around $5 each, that would mean a yearly savings of $4,420. That's enough for a Hawaiian vacation.
But wait, we're not done. What if Jake took those yearly savings and put them into an account earning 7% compound interest? In just 10 years, he'd have over $65,000, enough for a down payment on a house. In 20 years, he'd have almost $200,000, all from just eating at home more often.
Jake's example demonstrates that even in an era of burdensome healthcare and student loan obligations, you might have some wiggle room in your finances. Even a small cutback in dining out could allow you to finally pay off an onerous debt or build an emergency fund.
This might be easy advice to give, but harder to put into practice. Many of us dine out because we're too busy or tired to cook after a long day of work.
If we know how to cook at all.
And going to restaurants isn't just about the food. It's a social event, a place to see your friends, to connect with coworkers, take the edge off a stressful day.
So we're not saying never go out to eat, but if you want to cut down on this expense, you first have to know why you're spending the money in the first place. Is it a convenience or a luxury?
Yeah, it seems like they might be going through ways you can adjust this, but I totally agree with that. I think if it's a convenience issue, one of the things that I recommend is looking into easy things to make and or doing something like meal prepping, which is where you could like get all of the ingredients ready to go beforehand and or actually cooking a large portion of the meals beforehand so that way you can have it throughout the week without having to like cook every single day. As somebody who works, that obviously could be an issue, especially if you have other responsibilities. You'll have less and less time on any given day, and that could become problematic. So those would be things that I would definitely recommend. Just because you have a meal at home doesn't mean it has to be difficult. Obviously, I'm sure many of us as a child know of simple things like canned soup or, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like there's easy things that you could make in like less than 5 minutes if you really needed to. And so having some staples at home would allow you to get through that if it's a convenience issue. And again, if you want to have something a little bit better but still convenient, doing something like meal prep can be very handy. And also agreed, they mentioned the social aspect. I think that is definitely a big part of it. I feel like I personally like to commemorate a lot of events, birthdays, etc. with going out to eat. I feel like it just makes it a little bit more special than just having a meal at home. And I know this has been true for most of my life. I think in the day, when I was a kid, like I said, we didn't really go out to eat all that often. And so I think we would celebrate like me graduating like the next year of school when I was a kid with like a meal from like a Happy Meal from McDonald's. And like that was a big event for me at that time. And so it doesn't have to be big things, and it doesn't have to be like big sit down meals. Like you can still do things that are eating out or other ways of trying to make things interesting, even if you don't have that large of a budget. And you can also invite people to be at your home. So like there's another way you can make those more luxurious if you would like to, or add more pizzazz to your home, maybe get some decorations, things like that could also make it more interesting for a particular event. And also for your friends, it should be reasonable to have them over to your home. This is something that I classically do. Like I'll host somebody and then they'll host me back, and then we'll both make food at home and then share recipes, things like that. And I find it's generally a pretty enjoyable time overall, and I think it's a good habit to encourage for yourself and people you care about.
It's a convenience. In other words, if you're eating out because you don't have time to cook at home, well, the problem might be a lack of preparation. After all, brewing a pot of coffee and toasting a bagel can be less time consuming than waiting in a Starbucks line, and can potentially save you hundreds of dollars.
There are lots of resources on the web for how to make shopping and cooking cheap and simple, including this video we made about navigating the supermarket. But if you're still intimidated by the prospect, you could ease yourself into it by utilizing ingredient or grocery delivery services like Blue Apron or Instacart. These are definitely more expensive than doing your own shopping, but still cheaper than eating out.
We like to use cash at the supermarket to stay within a budget, but if you're trying to incentivize yourself, you could look into a credit card that gives rewards for grocery purchases. And it's always a good idea to keep some convenience foods like microwavable dinners in your freezer. That way, on days that you really don't feel like cooking, you'll have an alternative to stopping for takeout or ordering in.
On the other hand, if eating out is a luxury, that is, if you're doing it for social or psychological needs, there still might be ways to achieve that with less spending. For instance, you can share an entree. Restaurant portions are typically much larger than the average diner's appetite because it makes it easier for businesses to justify high prices. If you're there for the service and atmosphere, you can get that without overeating to the point of discomfort or leaving uneaten food behind.
If you have favorite restaurants you know you visit often, it might be a good idea to sign up for their email lists or check Groupon for details. But beware that these bargains are intended to make you visit more frequently. Same goes for diners' rewards cards. If you're not careful, these strategies might actually increase your monthly dining expenses.
Alcohol is one of the biggest markups for restaurants. So if you like to have a drink with dinner, you might want to find places that allow you to BYOB. Similarly, going to an ice cream shop after dinner is usually much cheaper than ordering dessert at the table.
And lastly, if you find yourself buying lunch just as an excuse to get out of the office, no one's forcing you to eat at your desk, hopefully. Take your brown bag to a nearby park or public space. It's the same psychological benefit without the cost.
Dining out is a big part of our culture, and it may be an important aspect of your social or professional life, so we're not suggesting you cut it out cold turkey.
But you shouldn't accept any large regular expense without asking yourself 3 fundamental questions. How much am I spending on this? What do I get out of it? And can I get the same benefit for less money? And that's our 2 cents.
Do you have any tips on how to save money while dining out? Go ahead and share them with us in the comments.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please hit like or subscribe. I will see you around.